justice for all.
May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Bagby.
Present.
Vice Mayor Paula.
Here.
Councilmember Brigham.
Here.
Councilmember Russell.
Here.
Mayor Wolter.
Here. Once again, I apologize for us being late. We just ran a little over on closed session. Before we get started, I just want to thank Alan. You did a wonderful job on the last city council meeting. It's up on YouTube. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, I encourage you to go. And if you're at home watching this on YouTube, I encourage you to come down to a city council meeting some night when you're looking for something to do. But thank you, Alan. Okay, first is report out of closed session. Jose?
Yes, Mayor. The City Council has concluded its annual evaluation of the city manager. The City Council concluded that the city manager is doing a good job. The council looks forward in continuing to work with the city manager and moving the city forward.
Thank you, Jose. Conflicts of interest, anything?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Agenda review, any changes to the agenda? Okay. Next is public comment. Anyone wishing to address the city council on items that do not appear on tonight's agenda may do so. Come on up and tell us what you have to say. I think Linda has a pad on the podium there for you to sign, Lariva. And tell us what's on your mind.
Lariva Miles, good evening. It's good to see all of you. I haven't been here for a while. I'm coming back to mention again, I think I did, it's probably been some time ago, about the amount of traffic that goes through North Main Street and Broad. That's the corner there where Miguel Sanchez was hit by a car and killed, right there where the horseshoe is that goes in front of the police department and the post office. And now a lot of traffic goes in there, preparing for Friday Night Live. And there are also a lot of very large trucks that line up in the middle of the street on Main Street to deliver things to the little market that's on the corner. And I only know because I live 1 block away, and I look into the plaza and that street at all times of the day and night during Friday Night Live, and I try to cross the street there from one side to the other. And I found that a lot of people stop at the four stop signs right there on the corner where the brew pub is and the market, and then they come zooming up the street. There are a lot of people who are turning into the horseshoe to get into the businesses there, the post office, the police department. And because it's such a wide street, they don't always see people who are standing there, let alone if they're children. So I just think that, once again, it's a place where something bad can happen again, and that if there's any way that you could determine, if there's a way we can let people know through lights or even little flags that people could take out saying they're crossing the street, or some way, I think that it would be helpful, because I think that we're going to have another accident there just based on what I see every day. So hopefully you'll take that into consideration in your planning for traffic in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Lariva. Anyone else wishing to address the council under public comment? Seeing no one, we'll close public comment and we'll bring it back to the dais. Proclamations or presentations, I see there are none this evening. Consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar will be approved together by one motion. Any member of the public or city council member may pull an item to discuss it separately. Anyone wishing to pull an item? Okay. A resolution?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move the approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bagby.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paula.
Aye.
Councilmember Brigham.
Aye.
Councilmember Russell.
Aye.
Mayor Wolter.
Aye. Next is communication. Any communications? No? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to our first item, which is a public hearing. Introducing the first reading of ordinance number 716-2017, amending Cloverdale Municipal Code, Section 1803.150. And this item is yours, David?
Correct, Mayor.
Uh-huh.
If you're ready, I'll proceed.
Yes.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, honorable council members. I'm David Kelly, the Community Development Director and Assistant City Manager. Also joining me on the presentation tonight is Associate Planner Rafael Miranda. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the public hearing item this night, and then turn it over to Rafael to give you some details, more of the specific details regarding the ordinance that's before you. The item that's coming before you, really give you a little bit of a backdrop, is a result of a legislative process to try and address the significant housing crisis that's affecting California. As many of you know, housing demand has outpaced new construction. And as a result of that, what we've seen is fairly significantly raising housing prices. The state legislature, in their attempt to help address this issue, as you know, is proposing a number of bills currently. But just a little over a year ago, the governor signed Senate Bill 1069. What Senate Bill 1069 did was amend existing section of the government code that related to second dwelling units. One of the impacts of the proposed legislation, or the legislation, SB 1069, was to amend that second dwelling unit requirements and kind of give it a new name. The new terminology that's now being used is accessory dwelling units. The term is intended to cover a number of kind of structures, and that can be a detached structure that's separate from an existing single-family home. It can also mean an attached structure, meaning you add an addition to your home and it becomes an additional living unit that's a basic component of construction of the existing home. In addition to that, it can also mean a repurpose of existing space within an existing family home, and often you'll hear that referred to as a JDU, or a junior accessory dwelling unit. The city of Cloverdale had an existing section within the zoning ordinance that provided specific rules and standards relative to second dwelling units. This legislation, however, in its attempt to alleviate some of the more maybe restrictive planning requirements, basically put in place a statewide, it defined what those standards are. And that's really why we're here tonight, is an update to the city zoning ordinance to address the changes in the existing second dwelling unit requirements, to address the legislative requirements that were imposed by SB 1069. In a minute, Rafael's going to kind of walk you through what those key changes were. But a little bit before we begin, I just want to talk a little bit about the process that got us here to date before the council. Upon the legislative approval of, and the governor's signature of SB 1069, staff reviewed that bill to kind of do an assessment of what impact it had locally. And then we consulted with our legal team at Myers-Nave to get some additional input on some of the legal ramifications and to clarify whether we needed to update our zoning ordinance. To be clear, technically we don't, because in essence, the legislative process established a requirement that outlines how the city is required to process second dwelling units or accessory dwelling units. However, by amending the zoning ordinance, it gives us the ability to impose some local conditions, some local requirements, so long as they're not more restrictive than the state requirements. Because the intent of the state requirements is that we make the process more efficient, and the goal of, again, addressing the issue of affordability. So with that said, we brought the kind of key changes to the Planning and Development Subcommittee for review. One of the key items that we sought feedback on was the maximum unit size. In the existing zoning ordinance, the maximum unit size was 800 square feet, but the new legislation allows up to 1,200 square feet. The direction of the Planning and Development Subcommittee was to look at allowing the maximum allowable size of 1,200 square feet. Upon review of the Planning and Development Subcommittee, we then held a workshop with the Planning Commission. We did invite some local builders to attend that meeting and offer some input about construction costs and data so that it would help facilitate some decision-making by the commission. That was done in May. We then brought back and held a public hearing before the commission in June. The commission made some final adjustments to the proposed ordinance, and ultimately they unanimously recommended approval of an ordinance to the city council. Included in your packet is a copy of the commission's agenda report, as well as the commission resolution making their recommendation. So at this point, I guess I'd like to introduce Rafael Miranda. Rafael has done an extensive amount of work to prepare the draft ordinance for your review tonight. Included with your packet is a red line of the proposed changes to the municipal code. In order to ensure internal consistency, not only with the zoning code, but also with other sections of the municipal code, the ordinance before you does include some other minor revisions to sections of the municipal code. And that was at the advice of the city attorney to really kind of clean up the language in the municipal code. So I'd like to turn it over to Rafael. Rafael's going to walk through kind of some of the key changes and where the council has some flexibility to make further changes or updates
Thank you.
on the ordinance.
Thank you, David. Rafael, before you get started, David, how many contractors showed up for that workshop that you did?
We only one contractor attended the Planning Commission meeting. That was a representative for Cloverdale Construction, and gave us some input and feedback on the size of the units that they thought would be supportable in the community. And that particular contractor is actually working on plans for a second dwelling unit for a resident in our community.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thanks, David. Good evening, council members, Mayor Wolter. Before I start, I just wanted to just briefly say that, just to touch on that, some points that David mentioned, but I just want to cover them because I think it's important to mention that the ordinance, the zoning ordinance and the municipal code already did have regulations which allowed this process. This is basically relaxing some of those regulations. And what the state, in line with the state requirements, the state really wants the cities to treat these things more just like in addition to a house. So relaxing a lot of the regulatory restrictions that were previously required or imposed on building a second dwelling unit. So just keep that in mind when we're going through these, is that the state's intent was that when people want to build these things on their property, that we should just treat them like they're building onto their house, not like they're, in the past, like we thought of, where we treated them like they're building an extra apartment or something like that. So with that in mind, the previous regulations that we did have on the books required someone who's building an accessory dwelling unit to require or supply one off-street parking space. Did not have to be covered, but with the new requirements, it would be pretty tough for the city to enact parking requirements because as the new state regulations read, is that you can't require a new parking requirements for off-street parking requirements for an ADU if the unit is located within a half mile of public transit, if the unit is constructed through the conversion of a part of an existing primary residence, if the unit is located within an existing accessory structure, and then subtracting all those, it would just be kind of a hassle for staff to figure out where exactly these little parts in the city, we could require parking where we couldn't, so we just decided just to not require parking throughout the city in any zoning district. And setbacks. Again, what I'm talking about here is just for new detached accessory dwelling units. The new setback is going to be 5 feet for side and rear setbacks. Again, the front is just 20 feet. But I just want to mention again, that's for new detached. I was discussing with the mayor earlier today and just brought to my attention that if someone wanted to build an attached ADU, that still would be subject to the regular zoning regulations which in a lot of districts should be 20-foot rear yard setback. And if it's at a two-story unit, it would be 10 feet on the second story. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this, because again, these are all things that are still in the works, and you guys have the power to make these things a little less restrictive if you would like. The minimum lot size, previously the minimum lot size was 6,000 square feet required, so any property that was less than 6,000 square feet could not build an ADU. But that restriction has been eliminated. Just as a note, if someone is for new subdivisions, even if a developer wants to come through the office with a small lot subdivision, no new lots could be built less than 3,000 square feet. And I think even in our regulations on that, there's a certain percentage of how many lots in that subdivision could be 3,000 square feet. So anyway, just keep in mind, no lots could be less than 3,000 square feet. And then at those points, the floor area ratio would kick in to cover the total square footage of what could be built on the lot, including the ADU. And just as an example, what that would be, 35% in a 3,000 square foot lot is a total floor area of 1,050 square feet. That'd be the total house, including an ADU, if someone chose to build an ADU on that. So maximum unit size. It was, as David said before, our zoning ordinance currently has on the books maximum size of 800 square feet. In line with the state regulations, we're setting it at 1,200 square feet, but somewhat on a tiered scale in that lots 6,000 square feet or less, less than 6,000 square feet, the maximum unit size is 800 square feet. But lots over 6,000 square feet or 6,000 square feet or greater, they could build the maximum of 1,200 square foot ADU. And again, just to touch on that also, the floor area ratio is always going to come into play here. So no more than 40% of the lot could be built with a structure. So if the lot is 6,000 square feet and they've already got a maxed out floor area ratio, I guess this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit. They could at minimum build an efficiency unit, but they couldn't build a 1,200 square foot ADU just because it says they could, the regulations say they could build a 1,200 square foot ADU. It's the floor area ratio that is kind of the overarching factor in all these scenarios. Height requirement. There's a 25 detached accessory unit, a maximum of 25 feet. If it's an attached unit, that's back to the regulations of the main house, which allows up to 35 feet. The minimum unit size, again, like I just said, the minimum unit size is allowed, the new code allows for an efficiency unit. Even in a case where the FAR is already exceeded, someone's already got 40% on their floor area, they can't even build a bedroom in their house, but they could build an efficiency unit ADU, that would be it. And what size is that? It's really going to come down to the building department to kind of figure out, but it's efficiency unit basically means, what's the minimum size bathroom area, what's the minimum size kitchen, what's the minimum size living room, and it's kind of add that up, and that's what an efficiency unit is, but it's pretty small. Design review, as David mentioned before someone could submit plans to the building department, they'd have to submit a design review application to the planning department, and we would review it for certain requirements. The state said that's, like I said before, we have to treat these just like a building permit. Someone just building onto their house, so you can't require someone to go through design review, well, maybe not in some cities, to go through design review when they're just building on their house. So that restriction has been eliminated. And one thing that the Planning Commission opined and wanted to add was that that the provision should add a covered parking for the ADUs, and so provision was added that the ordinance provide no less than a space that's 2 feet wide by 6 feet in length for covered bicycle parking for any ADU. That really sums up the changes to the existing ordinance that we're presenting, and the next steps forward, I think David's going to cover how to tackle and moving forward with this.
Okay, thank you, Rafael, for the overview of the proposed changes, and be happy to walk through the red lines with council if that would be helpful in terms of the revisions to the municipal code. A couple things I just wanted to mention that, based on the legislative nature of this, this item, and it being a general rule, it's considered exempt from CEQA, so city staff did not prepare an initial study for this project, but otherwise will file a categorical exemption. In addition, just the item, what's before you tonight is a public hearing item. Staff requests you take public testimony and input on this. And if at the end of the evening you have a number of options, one of which is to direct staff back to make any proposed updates or revisions, we can always bring it back as a draft ordinance. If it's simple cleanup, we can still clean it up, bring back a clean version for final reading and adoption at your next meeting. Or otherwise, if you feel there's more significant changes, we can always, council has the option to remand it back to the planning commission for additional review. One other point I just want to touch on is in regards to development impact fees for accessory dwelling units. Currently, we do not have a specific ADU fee within our development impact fee schedule. And what staff is recommending as a next step that we do, I've already obtained a scope of work from a consultant to prepare a update to our Nexus study to set specific fees, well, make a recommendation, I should say, to council on what the appropriate fees are for an accessory dwelling unit that addresses the specific impacts. And again, as we've presented, these ADUs can vary in size from a very small unit to up to 1,200 square feet. So there's a range of impacts, and we would anticipate that the qualified fee consultant will take that into account and bring forward a proposed maximum fee that the council can set for accessory dwelling units that meets the Nexus requirements of the government code. So we're not prepared to bring that forward yet. We wanted to make sure we get council feedback on the ordinance, and otherwise work with Jose to draft an agreement for that scope to get that effort moving forward. At this time, I'd just like to offer the council Raphael and my input on any questions you may have about the item before you.
Thank you, David. Council members, any questions at this time?
I have a few, Mr. Mayor, but perhaps if we go through, some of them will be answered in the process, so I'll hold them.
Okay. Anyone else? I just have two for you. I'd like you to walk us through the parking requirements or the lack of. Parking is really a touchy subject with me. There's some neighborhoods, when you drive through them on a Sunday morning or a Saturday evening, they look like a used car lot. And now, all of a sudden, we can add another family of maybe two people that would each have a car, and now all of a sudden that household has more cars added to the street. So what am I reading here with the half mile from the transit station? Those, if they're outside a half mile, we could require parking?
That is staff's interpretation. To be clear, SB 1069 put in place specific prohibitions where we could not require additional parking. And that is if you're within a half mile of public transit, and that includes any route, any bus stop. You cannot require an applicant to provide an additional parking space. If it was within a architectural, historically significant historic district, you cannot require it. If, it's an accessory dwelling unit that is attached to or part of the existing unit, then you can't. In any area where off-street parking are required but not offered to the occupant of the ADU. So what staff saw as a challenge is to define what this area would be where parking would be required and wouldn't be required, and we also understand that over time sometimes bus routes change, and so that it would be very difficult to be consistent in staff's evaluation of whether parking was required or not. And so how we drafted it was that parking would not be required. If Otherwise, if council decides that they really want to see parking be required, we'd have to just note the prohibitions and call out if you don't meet one of those prohibitions, that parking would otherwise be required.
Yeah.
It would just be a challenge for staff to really make sure that we're not addressing the prohibitions restricted.
Yeah. Well, I would like to see us consider that we do enforce some type of parking requirements when we can, even if we take it on a one case at a time. Because like I said, the parking situations in some neighborhoods is really getting out of hand. So, then I had one more question pertaining to item number 8, bicycle parking. What prompted that? A covered area 2 foot by 6 foot to cover bicycles?
Not exactly sure on what prompted that. It was at the direction of one of the commissioners that made the suggestion, and the rest of the commission agreed with it. I think it could potentially be viewed as adding an additional restriction to an accessory dwelling unit. I think part of the intent was to support the idea that accessory dwelling units could be kind of transit-oriented in the sense that you're facilitating bicycling to and from your unit, and that there would be parking provided. So this was a commission-driven requirement, and it's well within your purview to eliminate or revise that language from the draft ordinance. But it did come to you as a recommendation by the commission.
I would like to know a little bit more behind what the reasoning was for even asking that be put in there. Council members? Carol?
No, thank you. I was going to say, as long as we're on some of these subjects, as we go through, I want to make sure that we understand that there are a lot of questions that are going to come up about this. There is some confusion, and I can well understand why, on the part of folks about some of the aspects of the law. For example, just the fact that it's a ministerial as opposed to decisions made by the council is important for us to let people know. I want people to understand, again, that we're doing this as a result primarily of state law that has, to some extent, taken away our ability, in fact, to a large extent, in some cases, taken away our ability to control this. The other areas I'm interested in as we go through, I don't want people to be confused about, I rented to a roommate a spare bedroom in my home. Does that mean I have to have an ADU? Is that an ADU? Do I need a separate entrance? I mean, a lot of questions that come up about this. So what I'd like to suggest as we think about this is whatever we decide, however we settle this, we know that these can be affordable, they can be extra income for folks, particularly for seniors and people with empty nests or small families and individuals. At the same time, they can be very confusing and they can cause all kinds of problems, from parking to, all right, I have a nice little ADU, but I've got 6 people living in it. And there's no parking requirement. And that's when we end up with all of the cars, that kind of thing. And also, I want to make sure that when we complete this, I'd love to see us have it in a very simple form to be able to hand out at City Hall to anybody, very much like my favorite budget at a glance folder. Because this can get really confusing. By the time you're finished with the minimum requirements, maximum requirements, what do you have, when do you have to put a separate entrance in, when don't you? And it's one thing to change the ordinance, but it's another to make sure we're communicating it. And we usually do a pretty good job of that, so I'd like to make sure we keep doing it. And there are a couple of other things, but I think we can cover them as we go through. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mary Ann?
Just very short, I'm looking at this, I read the booklet that David had about accessory dwelling units, and I think we can really do something progressive here and really help our community by making it as streamlined as possible, but maybe not treating it as well, you have to do this or you have to do that, because the state's kind of already mandated what we have to do. But make it so, okay, if you do supply a parking space, an off-street parking space, one of your fees will drop. And if you supply 2 parking spaces, that fee will drop a little more. And the whole object of this is for affordable housing. So I would like, when we look at the fees we're going to charge, that we think about the grandmother and grandfather who are going to be out of the house now and not cramped in there with 3 generations and actually have a little place in the backyard, or the college students that are going to be able to stay at home comfortably and not drive their parents crazy. So I would like to look at this in a really progressive way and treat it kindly and not overprice everything. And instead of making it more difficult, make it easier, and for everything they give, like the parking spaces off-street, make it, they get a discount for this, they get a discount for that, to make it easier on the neighbors. The bicycle thing, I think that's really odd, that you would have to have a covered bicycle. I can say that I would be okay with if we suggested that it would be nice. I like bicycles, but I don't really want somebody telling me that if I'm going to build a unit, that I have to put a bicycle parking lot or parking space beside my unit when no one in the household rides a bicycle. I could hurt myself on a bicycle. So I don't ride bicycles. So I would just like to see us handle this in a kind of forward-thinking, let's try and solve this problem that is erupted in California and made it impossible for regular people with regular jobs to have a place to live. That's all.
Thank you, Marianne. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments. My understanding is garages could be converted into living dwellings as well. So going back to the parking situation, most people don't use their garages for their vehicles anyway today. But as people do move to add additional living space by using the garage, it's going to not only create the 2 new cars for the people living in the garage space, but also the cars that may have been in the garage from the main house out onto the street. So parking is going to become a challenge. And I just wanted to just say, you know, that is a concern because there's a lot of streets that parking is at a max right now. And so I don't know, you know, it's more of a comment than a solution here, but I think parking is going to be a real issue that we're going to have to struggle with.
Mayor Walter, if I could respond to Vice Mayor
Yes.
Paula on that particular comment. Vice Mayor Paula is correct that under the ordinance, a garage conversion could occur, and that could be considered an accessory dwelling unit. One thing to note, however, is if the garage does provide or address the covered parking requirement of the primary residence, the property owner would be required to make up that covered parking for the primary residence. This and I'll have to find it, but there's specific language that we did provide making that point clear, that if you did convert a garage and that garage space was a required covered parking for the primary residence, you would have to make that up.
The language actually doesn't only, it doesn't, it says removal of required parking. It's not just covered. So if they, because for example, our code requires 2 off-street parking spaces for the main dwelling unit, and one of them has to be covered. So if they remove both, they have to replace both spaces, not just the covered. They'd have to replace both those spaces.
Right, and that's, thanks Jose for pointing out, it's number 8 on page 53 of your staff report, or 120 of the zoning ordinance where that particular issue is addressed. So I think in so much, staff did take that into account. You could go the other way if the council so decided and allow, if someone was to convert a garage space, to not make up that parking, but wasn't staff didn't support that, commission didn't agree with that either, you know, because there is a recognition that there are parking issues in the community. So we did spell that out, that you'd have to make that parking up. One tool, for example, would be if someone was to convert a garage, they could build a carport that's in addition to that, assuming maybe it's setbacks, to provide that covered parking. But, that does remain a requirement for the existing or primary house.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I just had one other point. I do want to bring it up because I may forget to do it, and I want to make sure I don't. Short-term rentals, Airbnb style. This is not what these are intended to be. This is intended to be housing for our folks here, for individuals, families, couples. And I just want to make sure that as we go forward with this, we bear in mind what the object is. That the object is, in fact, a dwelling unit. Bureaucratic though that sounds, it's a home. It's somebody's home. And I personally don't object to the principle of short-term rentals, but I do have a problem if we start producing a great many of them when that's not the intention of this. I know that's certainly not the intention of the state, but we have to be careful of that because that has caused all kinds of difficulties in neighborhoods, as we know. So I just want to make sure that we bear it in mind and perhaps talk about it a little bit as we go forward. Thank you.
Mayor, council members, one of the discussion topics that we spent a lot of time on at the commission level was cost of construction and how that just cost in and of itself is still going to be a barrier. When I talk about costs, I'm not necessarily talking about city fees. I'm talking about just the cost of materials and labor to construct an ADU. What we determined, and Rafael did some survey work. I know we have some realtors in the audience tonight, that probably a minimum number in terms of per square foot cost is somewhere around $125 a square foot, and really kind of goes up from there depending on the level of amenities and improvements that are sought, and probably maybe $200 a square foot might be more typical. So when you think about that in the context of the square footage of an ADU, the investment that's going to be required by a property owner to build it is still fairly significant. And I think it acts to a certain extent to a certain extent
as a barrier, yes. But I think it's important for us to discuss it and to bring up just the kind of thing you're talking about, because I'm sure there will be questions about that. I certainly would have them in my neighborhood, and I know my neighbors will too. Thank you.
David, did you want to bring us through the red line?
Sure.
At this point?
So, it's Mayor, it's your desire if you want to just kind of walk through, but maybe my recommendation would be to really start with section 18.09180, which is page 51 of your agenda report, and kind of walk through pretty quickly, some of the basic red lines, and then maybe go through with more detail the substantive policy.
Well, David, I'm going to leave that up to you. Just
Okay.
reference the page number, the agenda packet page number.
Okay.
When you're speaking of a red line. And do you want council members to put in their 2 cents as you go through or at the end?
I think it would be helpful if as we go through it, we can try to build consensus.
Okay.
And see if we can, get through the draft ordinance and come out with a product that works for the council.
All right, you're on.
So I'll start with page 51 of your agenda packet, and it's also labeled as page 118 of the zoning ordinance. Just as noted there, the section is currently called second residential dwelling units, and we're renaming it accessory dwelling units. And that first paragraph really is just making that change from second to accessory. So as we move on to the next section, the main red line change there is that rather than being subject to design review, the new process is required by SB 1069 is that it would be subject to a building permit. So that's the ministerial process that the legislature adopted. Don't have a lot of flexibility on that given the legislation. Moving forward, and I'll just maybe jump down to item 1. We struck the minimum lot size for a parcel to be eligible for second residential dwelling units at 6,000 square feet. That was, again, our intent in providing some flexibility for property owners to develop an ADU. The kind of what we see is guidance here is the floor area ratio requirement, which means that no more than 40% of a lot can be developed with structures. So we didn't want to just kind of arbitrarily cut it off at 6,000 square feet. If someone had a 5,800 square feet lot, this gives them the flexibility. But again, this is where that tiered structure came in. If you are less than 6,000, the largest unit ADU you could build is 800 square feet. If you're above that, you could build up to 1,200 square feet. Again, it's going to still be site dependent. Moving down, the new item number 1 or previous item number 2, the parcel intended for the accessory dwelling unit must contain an existing single-family detached unit. So someone couldn't come in with a vacant piece of property and just say, I want to build an accessory dwelling unit. It's really intended to be, now they can do it concurrently, and we would require that they occupy the main home, concurrently to the accessory dwelling unit, but that was language that was there. We just, again, cleaned it up. No more than one accessory dwelling unit shall be placed on the same parcel. Some jurisdictions are allowing multiple accessory dwelling units, particularly where you restrict the size of those units. So, you think we talked about a maximum of 1,200 square feet. Well, what if someone wanted to come in and put 2 350 square feet units? But again, we're not proposing to be that creative. We kind of stuck with what we had allowed before, which was 1, and that's what that section reflects.
I would say that there are jurisdictions in California that are allowing, especially in the bigger houses, like the 3,500 square foot houses, and big lots, they're allowing a conversion of the interior to like 800 or 1,000 square foot apartment, plus an accessory dwelling unit outside, if the lot allows. So they're actually allowing 2. And there's some places that are actually allowing you to line up tiny houses on some lots that are big enough. I think we can either consider it, I'd like us to think again about that, about only allowing 1. And it would be a case by case again. If you had the property, you had a big old house, because there's a lot of older people that are sitting in houses that are huge when we built cathedrals instead of living spaces, So, I don't know. I'd like to be a little more progressive than that, than just 1, but I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Council, what do you think of that idea?
I'm open to, I'm open to things depending upon lot size, but we don't have design review and things of that sort, which always concerns me a little bit. I don't want to close my mind to things. I think I think some of this may progress as we go along too, even though we think it won't. But as people become accustomed to this, we may very well have to bring this back to planning and bring it back at some point and say, did we make the right decisions? Is this popular? Is it working? Is it not? What are the problems? So perhaps rather than attempt to do everything at once, I'm willing to do it incrementally.
The only reason I bring this up is because we have such a small urban growth boundary. So our expansion capabilities are to build a lot of new housing units is pretty minimal. So the only thing we can do really is infill development, which is what everybody in the state seems to be doing. So I think we should have open mind about that.
Yeah.
Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm certainly open to considering allowing more during certain circumstances, but I clearly would want to make sure it's well thought out on how that would look
Sure.
Yeah.
aesthetically, as well as how it would work. There's no doubt there's a lot of families where there's no way for their children to move out, so they're moving home. They're getting married, moving home, and so houses are now multi-family homes. And so I think if it's appropriate size-wise to make that where it works for the families, we should at least consider that.
Melanie?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I have to confer, and I think we've all seen them. We've all seen the Victorian houses in San Francisco that were chopped up into 3 and 4 and 5 apartments, and it's what's practical, and it's what has to happen
Yeah.
when you have that kind of demand. And I just think it's inevitable So I don't think we can stop it at one. I think it's going to happen. So let's put a mechanism in place that gives us the aesthetic results that we're interested in.
Well, you know, I'm not opposed to being open-minded about it and on a case-by-case basis looking at it, but I can tell you, when I go out into my backyard, I sure would be disappointed if my neighbor was building a small housing project back there because we're letting him do more than one. So I think it has to be the right parcel for the development. So David, however you want to try and craft that, I think if I'm hearing everyone correctly, on a case-by-case basis, we would be receptive to that.
Yeah, and of course, with the zoning ordinance, we need to kind of put in,
Firm it up.
codify
Yeah, we need
a
to
standard
firm it
that
up.
we can use that provides it in, black and white language that's, legally supportable. Maybe we can table that particular discussion until we get to some of the other points, because I think some of the other items that we're going to discuss in terms of parking might weigh in on that decision. And so maybe just for sake of time, we move forward and we'll come back to that one. Are you okay with that, Mayor?
Yes.
Okay. So moving forward, crossed out item number 4, now number 3. This is the tiered provision where accessory dwelling units on lots less than 6,000 square feet are allowed as long as they don't exceed 800 square feet, and then on lots greater than 6,000 square feet, accessory dwelling units shall not exceed an interior size of 1,200 square feet. This may be one option where you could set another tier. So, for example, we're actually working with an applicant that is located in close proximity to downtown, has a lot that's slightly over an acre in size, that easily supports an accessory dwelling unit, and in that case, they probably could build another unit on their property, and it would be relatively unimpactful. So, that would be one provision where the council might say, if you have a larger lot, you could build more than one. But that doesn't address the issue where you might have a single-family home, a larger home that can be kind of internally subdivided in a way that supports more than one accessory dwelling unit.
If I could just add something there, David. One thing I forgot to mention when I was going over the changes. I don't remember if the staff presented this to the Planning Commission or not, but the Planning Commission elected not to add a bedroom limitation. Other cities, have a minimum or a maximum size of bedrooms. They say maybe 900 square feet unit and 2 bedrooms. We don't have currently any bedroom requirement. I just want to point out that's something that's in your purview. You could add, even though it says 1,200 square feet, we could add 1 bedroom if you wanted to go that far. So maybe that's one limitation. If parking is a big thing in your mind, how many families are going to be living in a 1-bedroom ADU, even if it is 1,200 square feet. So that's just one point. That's one thing you guys have to, at your power, to add that further restriction on the bedrooms, number of bedrooms.
David?
Thank you, Rafael. We did add clarifying language that under item 3, that in no case shall an accessory dwelling unit cause a lot to exceed the maximum floor area ratio, which is 40% for
lots over 4,000 square feet.
For lots over 4,000 square feet. So that's kind of a limiting factor in terms of the amount of development. Item number 4, this is where we indicate, because the requirement for design review, which is a discretionary process, is eliminated, we put in language that to try to ensure that the accessory dwelling unit is compatible from an architectural perspective with the existing home. So we put some guidance in there that it will incorporate the same or similar architecture features, building materials, and colors as the primary residence. Compatibility with the primary residence includes coordination of colors, materials, roofing, and other architectural features so that the appearance of the property remains that of a single-family residence. Again, trying to ensure that it's compatible with the neighborhood. And someone, as much as I like interesting architecture, we thought if we didn't provide something like this, you might see some product out there that could cause compatibility concerns. Item 5 and 6, again, just kind of cleanup language. changing second to accessory dwelling units. Item number 7, again, this is touching on the design issue with revising the requirement based on our interpretation of legislation that it no longer can be discretionary, is, ensuring that any accessory dwelling unit is compatible with the neighborhood and neighboring properties by ensuring that windows and other things that may be, again, it's with these reduced setbacks, there's potential for kind of privacy and intrusion issues with windows being close to property lines now, that at least through the building permit process, we look at those and just ensure that those types of window placement are minimized without a real discretionary review process. It's really going to be done at the building permit level, but again, just ensuring that the windows that might be placed that are next to a neighbor's home are glazed or placed in such a way that, again, it's not impacting the neighbors where the accessory dwelling unit is built. Number 8 is the codification of the no additional parking requirement, and also sets forth the language that if it is a garage conversion, that required parking would need to be made up. And so this, I can walk through that language, but that's basically the intent of item number 8. Item number 9 is what the council discussed briefly about the covered bicycle parking area. And again, I think the intent of the commissioner that brought this issue up was to support bicycling, I believe.
Okay. David, we could just pause for a little question session. Melanie?
Well, I just wanted to, was wondering, first of all, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the Planning Commission's creative thinking, and I think I get where the motivation is for this. My concern is that it's not, in order to make this more transit-friendly, and it would really need to be a bicycle/scooter/motorcycle parking, but I don't think I want to see it as a requirement. I think I'd want to see it as one of the, if you have a parking space, you get a discount. Just put it in that category, and that just would be, I was just wondering if that would be possible.
I like that.
Well,
Yeah, I like that too.
if I could just take a minute, Planning Commissioner Cox is in the audience. Bob, do you remember why that was put in?
That item was brought forth by one of the commissioners thinking that it would be encourage bicycling rather than driving, encouraging rather than using a vehicle in the transit area for sure, but also just around town. So those people that wanted to use bicycling, they would have a place to store it, especially with the size of the ADU. Wouldn't really provide space enough to store it inside the unit. So that was the thinking behind that. I'm sorry, I don't remember it being a requirement as opposed to a suggested, but I see it in there as a requirement, so it may be modified by your decision and however you want to craft it.
Thank you, Bob.
Actually, I mean, in that light, when you think about it, it does make sense because it's also an aesthetic improvement, because instead of having bicycle or motorcycle kind of, out, it would be a designated spot, but I still see how we could, I don't know if it's sensible to require it, but I think it's sensible to have it be an item where if you put it in, bicycle, scooter with a place to charge your electric scooter or electric motorcycle, then they get a discount.
I like that.
Yeah, I'd much rather have it as an option. I mean, I think it's a nice thing to suggest, and certainly a bike storage area with a lock and that kind of thing can be useful. Something for a motorcycle, we could start getting things larger. I wouldn't want to require that, so,
I mean,
yeah, any
the larger
options?
lots, it wouldn't make as big of a difference, but on a tighter
Yeah.
lot, it might make a difference and really improve the property.
It should, and it also might make a difference in the ease of rental, too.
Sure.
You never know as
Sure.
things progress, so good idea. make it an option.
Mayor, Council, if I can, just, it sounds like there's consensus that we eliminate the bicycle parking as a requirement. Just wanted to touch real quickly on a comment made earlier by Councilmember Russell about, a brochure. And Rafael's actually already developed a trifold that kind of highlights some of the aspects of accessory dwelling units. And we can certainly incorporate it in as a recommendation.
That's a very good idea.
Provide bicycle parking. We can also look at it when we bring back a proposed fee resolution, whether the council wants to give some credit to a building permit applicant that provides it. So if there's consensus on that, we will eliminate this as a requirement.
Such a nicer, positive way to look at it. Like, you provide these things, you get a discount.
That's nice.
Saves you money, makes it cheaper. I like that angle better than,
Punitive.
Yeah, it was a good idea you had.
Okay. Moving right along, David.
Okay.
Okay.
Number 9, previously read that separate utility meters may be provided for second dwelling units. Previously, it only provided that in R2, R3, and office residential zoning districts, and frankly, we don't. If an applicant wanted to provide a separate utility meter in an R1 district, we think that certainly would be fine. So we eliminated the more restrictive language. Item number 10, in cases where an existing primary dwelling structure is to be converted to an accessory dwelling unit or partially converted to create an ADU, the area designated for the ADU must comply with the applicable, basically building code requirements. So again, if you're going to convert an ADU, you do have to bring that portion of your residence up to code, and that's the intent of this. Number 11, we did clarify that a separate entrance to an existing, to be called an accessory dwelling unit shall be provided. Number 12 is, again, specifically addressing the requirements of SB 1069 that we are supposed to complete our review of any plans submitted for an accessory dwelling unit within 120 days. So there's kind of a hard timeline that was built into the legislation, and that's intended to reflect that there. Item number 13, height. This is that basically just defines that where you have an accessory dwelling unit that's attached, that the height of that accessory dwelling unit can be the same height as the home that's there. If you're building a detached accessory dwelling unit, the purpose is to ensure that the accessory dwelling unit is is subordinate to the primary home, and it can be built up to 2 stories with a height of 25 feet. The height requirement for a single-family residence is 35 feet, so that would kind of create, some architectural differences there in the height. Number 14, setbacks. This sets forth the new setback requirements that are provided for in SB 1069. Requires the minimum interior side yard and rear yard setbacks of 5 feet, 10 feet if you're on a street yard, or a street side yard, and the front yard is basically staying the same, which is 20 feet. A new attached accessory dwelling unit basically shall be the same as the setbacks that apply to the primary structure. So if you're adding on to a home and you want to create a separate residence within the existing, the same setbacks would apply as they would for a single-family home. And then accessory dwelling unit that's created as a result of internal conversion of existing illegally permitted garage or habitable living space shall be allowed regardless of whether the existing structure complies with current setbacks requirements. So in some cases, you have, particularly in the older parts of town, you have a detached garage that has a 0 lot line. Under the legislation, if a building permit applicant wanted to convert that existing garage to an accessory dwelling unit, they could under the legislation without meeting the setback requirements because it's existing, and that's intended to codify that. And there's kind of a general provision about side and rear yard setbacks provided shall be sufficient for fire safety, and again that's important to address the fire requirements.
So with item number C, if they were to do that, they would still have to provide a parking spot to replace that garage spot.
That is correct. If
Okay.
that structure met the covered parking requirement for the existing home, they would have to
Replace.
provide additional covered parking. Really what we reviewed is really the heart of the ordinance today. A lot of the other components is largely cleanup language, changing the terminology from second dwelling unit to accessory dwelling unit throughout the municipal code. Happy to go over that with you, but I think, it's not particularly substantive.
Okay, thank you. Council members, any questions before I open the public hearing? Hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to address this item may do so. Just come up to the podium and give us your name and say what you have to say.
Good evening again, Lariva Miles. I'm a resident of Cloverdale. I have a couple of questions about these new changes that are being made by the state. I heard you say during your presentation that the state's intent is to relax conditions on building these accessory units. In the past, I can remember a time when I heard that a neighbor wanted to build a second accessory unit on their property and they were told no by the city. So in your presentation, I'm hearing that there are not too many changes from what was initially allowed. And so there seems to be a disconnect in between maybe something that was done by previous departments in Cloverdale with regard to whether or not they would let homeowners build on their property, and now it's being required by the state that it's made easier to do that. So I'm kind of glad to hear that. But I just wanted to mention that I had heard stories where the city had basically said, no, you can't build on a property that had more than enough land to build, just because I don't know the reason why. So, and that was within the last 10 years or so. So
Well,
I'm glad to hear that there's a difference now in terms of what's going to be done with the accessory units.
Well, I'm sure every story has a lot of pages, and, without seeing the whole book on why they were told no, it's really difficult to speculate, but...
The only reason that I mention that is that there's a general feeling in the city before that the city was not as amenable to you being able to build on your property, even though you might have the square footage to do it, which is now regulated by the state of California, so they can't as easily say no anymore. That's just the feeling that I got being a homeowner and hearing this story. I'm also curious to know about the development impact fees that Mr. Kelly was talking about haven't really been developed yet, and so that's coming. And I was just curious as to how those new fees will compare with the fees that you currently have in place if somebody was trying to build a second unit on their property, and whether or not it'll be taken into consideration that hopefully they will be competitive, so it will make it easier to build as opposed to more difficult. And I think it might also be a good idea to have some estimates of costs for people who are considering doing this once you figure out how much all these costs are. I know I've gone to the permit department in the past and asked how much is it going to cost to do X, Y, and Z, and there was a list of all the different costs were going to be associated with doing what I wanted to do. I think it would be important to have the same kind of list for anybody considering doing an accessory unit so that they'd know what they're getting into before they launch the big project in terms of what you're going to require of them. I also spoke to the city engineer, Mark, today, and I had a very informative discussion about building codes, and I had some questions about flood requirements. If you live near a creek and are required to have flood insurance, Mark was telling me that now the more you build, the more, I don't know if it's the state or FEMA is requiring you to move your property off the ground by, I think you said 12 inches or something like that?
Above maximum flood stage.
Above maximum flood stage. So I'd be curious to know how building these new units will be affected by these things coming down the road from FEMA for somebody like me who lives in a flood area, and if I want to build an accessory unit, are they going to start saying, well, only if you lift it an additional foot off the ground can you start to build?
Yeah, for basically, the federal floodplain management requires you to build any addition to your home above flood stage plus 12 inches. So some of these ADUs, and I think something that we need to discuss internally, is how do we accomplish that with the building code to make sure that any add-ons to a property that's within a floodplain has to be built above flood stage plus a foot.
Okay. I think it would be important to be able to have that somewhere so that somebody who's in my same condition would know that there are additional requirements that need to be made if you live in a flood zone, which I do. How will building accessory units, and then this is the last one, affect building additional units on a property with R3 zoning, which allows you to build up to 16 units an acre? So let's say I have a house, I already have an existing accessory unit, or a place that's being used as a unit for my father, and then I decide I wanted to build additional units in the back of the property, of course, depending on how much property is left behind the two dwellings that I already have. Have you had done any discussion or had any requests for something like that? I mean, how will that affect what I can do and what I can't do with the property?
Ms. Miles asked a very good question relative to zoning. We actually have an applicant that has submitted plans for an ADU on an R3 designated property. And they can, subject to the ordinance or the current rules, construct the ADU under the state's process until we adopt a new ordinance. However, Ms. Miles is asking about the density associated with R3. An applicant or a property owner has to decide how they would like to meet the density requirements on their subject property. So they have the ability, looking at the density requirements, to build a multifamily unit in lieu of an accessory dwelling unit if that's their desire. Many of our R3 properties, particularly along the boulevard, have an existing single-family home or designated R3. The property owner has to make a decision whether they want to build multifamily units to address to kind of build to the density of the R3 zoning district, or, as a particular property owner has recently filed with the city, just build an accessory dwelling unit. And so it's really kind of a property owner decision. Staff, of course, is always happy to have that conversation with the property owner about what those options are. But we don't dictate that. It's kind of their decision to make whether they would like to build, in the particular instance that we're reviewing now, they literally want to build this accessory dwelling unit for a family member. It's permitted, and so we would allow it to move forward. If however, they decided that they wanted to build a multifamily unit, they could do that under the density requirements. But again, one of the conversations we've had with residents about that is there's a cost factor. And that gets back to the economics of building a multifamily type of development. It's usually, again, getting back to saying $200 to $300 a square foot. It's a cost factor for someone that wants to build a multifamily unit, and, again, whether rental rates are going to support that, or whether they have family members that can, help offset the cost of that construction. So a very good question, and it kind of gets down to, looking at the property, kind of site-specific, what's the size, what's the density that's supported under the R3 zoning district, and comparing that with what they can do with an accessory dwelling unit, and ultimately it comes down to, I think, a personal decision of the property owner is which way they want to go.
Thank you, David. Lariva, anything else?
Actually, I just have one more thing that I thought of when you were talking about this. When the city decided to rezone properties, our property was automatically rezoned from R3 to R2. I came to the city council and I said, I would really ask you not to do that, because that would, cut the value of the property in half, would take away all of the options that I have with the property. And now, because there was an allowance for me to keep the same zoning, the property that you're talking about is directly behind me that wants to have the additional unit. None of that could be happening today if you had rezoned the 3-acre parcel in the center of Cloverdale R2. So I just want to thank you for allowing that to happen, because it would not be happening right now if the city had not recognized that it might be a good idea to keep the R3 zoning. So thank you.
Thank you, Lariva. The public hearing is still open. Anyone else wishing to address the city council on this item? Seeing no one, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I'm going to ask council members if there's any more questions, followed up by staff, making sure that you have clear direction.
I'm good.
Can I just briefly answer one of Ms. Miles' questions?
Sure.
Just one of the beginnings, I can think of 2 specific reasons why maybe some people may have been told no in the past. Previously, anybody who's building a grand unit, they were subject to the rear yard setback no matter what, so 20-foot rear yard setback. When I first got here, someone applied and they would have resulted in an 18-foot setback, so they withdrew their application. Secondly, one thing we're taking out, applicants, if their property contained a garage that was already converted, they couldn't apply. And I've had multiple calls, people would call and ask that, and I would tell them no. So there's 2 examples of, but that won't be the story going forward.
Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing. No more questions. And David, do you have your directions?
I think there are 2 outstanding issues that staff would want to get feedback from council on, that council mentioned. One was the parking requirement. As we currently outlined, that no additional parking would be required for an accessory dwelling unit. If the preference is, or if there's consensus in the council, to leave that as it is, or to leave it strictly within the provisions and prohibitions of SB 1069. The issue there for staff is that we're going to have differential parking requirements depending on this criteria, and it puts us in a difficult position to define it exactly. The second issue is relative to the number of accessory dwelling units. If council wants to, add another tier or come up or provide staff direction on whether you want to require us or otherwise recommend additional dwelling units beyond 1. It may be good to move forward with this, get us adopted with just the 1. And as time permits, make further revisions, but that, I guess staff would seek council's direction on that.
Okay. Council members, why don't we take the first issue of parking? How do we feel about that? Do we want to try and have an extra parking spot on the property?
I think my concern is that we could insist on, or we could try to have an extra parking spot in, but the places where, the neighborhoods that are the most problematic are within the half mile of transit, and I think that's going to be the issue. So I'm just not sure it's going to be, it's not going to be effective in the areas where we probably need it the most. My other concern there is that I think that, whenever you make a change like this, it's, you're affecting, it's the next 20, 25, 30 years, really. And I think that we're going to see car technology change drastically in the next 10 years. And so I'm not sure we're going to get if we try to go for the one parking place, I'm not sure we're going to get the result that we want.
Okay, so you prefer to leave it the way it's
I
presented?
prefer to leave it because I think it'll be easier to enforce as well.
Okay. Any enticement that could be offered if they do voluntarily
And
put
I
on?
Yeah.
absolutely support that.
That's what I would be in
Yeah.
favor of.
Yeah.
Staff certainly, as we engage our consultant, we could build that into the fee resolution that the council considers, so that if someone provides parking, it can be considered a less impact, and therefore they have a lesser transportation or streets and thoroughfare fee. So that might be a very appropriate mechanism to kind of address it. You're incentivizing in a way by through the basis of a fee. So that might be a good way. And of course, we would have to work with Myers-Navi to ensure that it meets the nexus requirements.
Everybody in
Yeah,
agreement?
I like the incentive plan. I really do.
I do like the incentive, but I think we should not just say, well, it'll be this much off, because 1,200 square foot house, accessory dwelling unit, is bigger than some of the houses I've lived in. Now, that's not a small house. So I would think that we should give them that break, say if they do 2, give it to them twice. If they do 2 parking spaces, don't just limit it to 1.
Well, I
You mean
think,
you mean depending upon the size of the...
Depending on the
No,
Dwelling
I
unit.
don't care what size it is.
You don't care? Okay, that's why I want to clarify.
Yeah, because a lot of people do have 2 cars.
Well, they
They're
do,
gonna be
yes.
living in there. So if they can supply 2 parking spaces, then give them that discount twice. Make it as appealing as possible to get that parking off the street.
I'm okay with that, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm fine with that as well, but recognizing, and I think we need to put it on the table, most people that have those spaces won't use it to put their cars in.
Yeah.
They're going to be out in the street, they're just going to have storage, and it's just the way it is. And so I wish there was a mechanism to give them the discount and somehow enforce that they use it for a parking space. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case in some cases. So I'm
It's
fine
not.
with it.
Okay. So then it sounds like we have a consensus.
That's right.
Reduce fees for 1, a little more reduction in fees for 2, however you legally work it out with Jose.
That'll come back, Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, the fee resolution for the ADUs will come back as a future agenda item, and that meaning that we'll keep the ordinance language as it is written currently as is.
Okay.
And I'd like to see actually, I think that the bicycle, scooter park, I think it's, especially for the smaller units, I think that that's a really good idea, and I'd like to just see that on the fee schedule as well.
Oh, okay.
That's a
In
discount.
addition
An
to
enticement for that as
yeah.
well. Okay.
But we're keeping it as a suggestion,
As
as an
absolutely.
option, with a
Absolutely.
discount.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now the 1 unit or 2 units, or do we want to limit it to 1 and come back and visit that later? Why don't we start with you, Joe?
Well, thank you. No, I like the third tower. You have 3 tiers, and, based on the square footage of the property, there's, one size don't fit all. I certainly wouldn't want to see more than 1 on the current size parcel that we have here, but if we wanted to put another tier in there, where somebody has an acre or half an acre of property, that we certainly would want to entertain if they want to put a second unit. So that's what I would suggest, yeah.
I think most of us, feel that there should be some flexibility there.
Yeah, so
Or
maybe
4,000
another
square
tier.
foot house, I have no problem with that. I think we're going to see that.
That's
Yeah.
kind of what I was thinking, is all these big houses that are empty.
My
be
lot
converted.
is,
Yeah,
my
it can be
lot is
converted.
4,000 square feet, so I figured that's a lot of living space.
See what happens.
Okay, so then you've got that on the number of units, and I don't know how I feel about that, but okay, if it's a bigger lot, I can understand that. If it's an acre. But at what point can we require parking off-space, off-street? If they were to do 2, could we then require parking? I guess it's something that I would be interested in seeing. So, just some homework to kind of look at that.
And just to remind the council, as far as the changes go, it seems to me like we're talking about possibly doing some homework, coming back to reintroduce the ordinance for a first
Yeah,
reading.
yeah.
That's what it seems like. If what's being amended was not discussed at the planning commission level, then that would require it to go back to the planning commission in order for discussion. The only reason I bring that up, I know we're trying to get some of these changes in place, given that the law did change. Currently, we have state law anyway, but I know that staff did a great job in looking at different areas like the compatibility, things like that, that can be imposed through this ordinance. Just bringing that up because it will definitely delay just a little bit, the implementation of the ordinance, especially if we come back as a first reading again. So ordinances require 2 readings, 30 days after they become effective. If it wasn't discussed, and I wasn't at the planning commission, I think it may have been, this issue may have been discussed, so we may be okay. But not triggering that is important if the council wants to get something in place soon.
How many applications do we have now? One?
Currently, staff is processing 3 applications
3,
for
okay.
ADUs.
All right. So we'll go ahead and read the ordinance by title only? Is that what you're suggesting, or do you think
No,
it should go
that's
back?
it's up to the city council. As far as the changes that the council requested so far regarding removing the required spots for bicycles, that could be removed, no problem, and we could go ahead and introduce as amended. The change, putting in a different tier, I think that staff would want a little time to look at where that trigger would be, what that cutoff would be. In that case, the ordinance would not be ready for first reading. It would be, the item would be continued and brought back for first reading at the next meeting in order for us to do that homework and that change.
Okay, thank you. So then we're going to go ahead and continue the hearing, and we'll bring it back, do you think, on August the 22nd? Does it have to be date specific?
Yes, it does, and there needs to be a motion and a second, and in order to save the notice public hearing status.
Okay. So, David, is the 22nd okay?
Yes, yeah. We'll put our heads together quickly to come back and reintroduce the ordinance at your next.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, if we move forward and introduce this by first reading, and 30 days later it becomes the new ordinance, that doesn't prohibit us from amending it down the road if we choose to, going back to adding a second tier, does it?
It does not.
I mean, it gives you more time. You could put the second tier through the planning and work that out and bring it back to update the ordinance. But it gives you the tools today for the applications that you have in place today to move forward with. I mean, is that still doable?
If the council feels comfortable in giving staff direction to move forward with and introduce the ordinance without the changes, staff's certainly fine with that. It's a little bit more process if you want to see those changes, you introduce it and you bring it back for adoption, and then we come back. We really have to we have to kind of start over again with respect to holding a public hearing before the commission.
I understand that. We're going to have a second public hearing anyway, because this would be continued under this process. So I guess the only addition, if I'm understanding this correctly, is to add a new tier, which would be in addition to what's here. So nothing really would change. It'd just be an additional section added to this ordinance. Mm-hmm. Is there something else?
No, I don't.
So really, there would be, this ordinance would be in place, and then assuming the third tier comes back to the council, then we would be talking about that one item and that one item only. Is that?
So, Councilmember Paula, great question, and it really, we start getting into more of the government code, the requirements for public hearing. The option right now is if this change or this potential change was discussed at the Planning Commission, the council can simply say, well, let's continue the public hearing, let's bring back, and it would delay the ordinance really the 15 days to be in place completely in order for it to come back to the council if we don't adopt it today. If the council was interested in adopting it today, what would happen is this would be introduced, it would be adopted at the next reading, it would go into effect, 2 weeks earlier, but that amendment, we would run it, we would have to start from we couldn't just come directly to council, we would have to go to the planning commission and then go through the process again. So it's a little bit of timing. We could get something in place right away, which is currently what you see now, or this could be delayed a little in order to get the other provision, the second tier in, or the third tier, or we could just get this. So let me just, two options. We get this in place now and don't mess with the second tier, and then run the second tier through the whole process again through the planning commission, or we delay this 2 weeks and try to get the second tier in this version.
I like that better.
So,
The commission meets on like the 16th, though.
I just want to get clarification.
Joe has the floor. Give me 1 second.
Just clarification on what you just said, if I could, City Attorney. My understanding was the second tier or third tier would have to go back to the Planning Commission anyway, because it's a change, substantial change that they did not have a conversation about. Is that?
Well, I'm
I'm a little confused on
No,
that.
you're asking the right question, and I think
Okay.
they will provide the answer as to whether the planning commission discussed this. That's the key, and you
Okay.
hit it right on. If the
Well, that's-
planning commission discussed, then we could just continue this and do it now. If the planning commission did not discuss, you're absolutely right, substantial change, we need to
Okay.
go back anyway.
So I'd like to maybe get clarification on that point.
Staff certainly outlined to the commission that they have the ability to recommend more than one accessory dwelling unit as part of this ordinance. I think the recommendation was what you see before you was one additional. I think that was where their level of comfort was.
Okay.
But they didn't have the same policy direction as the council's provided in terms of this kind of tiered structure. So, whether that gives us enough latitude to be able to continue the public hearing, I defer to the city attorney.
If they considered it, and if that was something they brought up regarding whether it's just one or two, they didn't have to go into a deep level of detail. If they've considered whether it's one or whether it's two, then they've considered the item and decided to stick with one. So if that's what the discussion was at the planning commission, then we could check off that box as far as
Okay.
being discussed.
So-
That makes sense.
Melanie?
I just was going to point out that they meet on the 16th, because they have a special meeting. So if
Okay.
it did need to go back, that
Thank you.
That's-
Council members, anything else? Then I'm going to recommend that we go ahead and continue the public hearing to August 22nd. I need a motion,
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
and is there a second?
Second.
Linda, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Bagby?
aye.
Vice Mayor Paula?
Aye.
Councilmember Brigham?
Aye.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Wolter?
Aye. Okay, so that item is going to be continued to August the 22nd. Next item is Resolution Number 0502017, authorizing the city manager to execute an individual at-will employment agreement with Ms. Susie Holmes as Cloverdale's financial manager. Ron, I'm trying to get to you as quick as I can.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my great pleasure to introduce Ms. Susie Holmes. And I have the great sadness to say that Joanne Cavallari, after serving over 3 years as your finance manager, will be retiring on September 21st. But we are very happy that we found a very competent finance manager to come in after Joanne. She's not going to be, we're never going to find anybody like Joanne, but we found somebody who is really good to fill in for Joanne. So let me talk a little bit about the process that we went through. Joanne announced her retirement almost a year ago, and so we have been preparing and going through what we call the business succession planning, and I want to thank especially Linda Moore for all the help on the succession planning, because we actually had a very complicated schedule and process, and we had to make sure that the timing was just right so that we could do the application process and then the interview process and then the agreement negotiation process in order that the new candidate that would be selected would be able to give notice at their present job and then be ready to start after the retiring finance manager left. So we are getting very close to completing that process, and I know this was a major goal of the City Council to make sure all its key leadership positions are filled in a timely manner. We advertised for this position in local newspapers as well as a lot of online recruitment websites. 7 applications were received. After screening, the top 3 applicants were interviewed by a panel of 3 professionals, which included the Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director David Kelly, the Cloverdale City Treasurer Mike Nixon, and the Healdsburg Assistant City Manager Heather Ipolati. In addition, Mayor Walter, myself, and Finance Manager Joanne Cavallari observed the interviews, but we did not participate in the ranking of the candidates. And the way that works is between candidate interviews, the observers get up and leave the room and allow the interview panel to do the ranking. At the conclusion of the interview panel, Susie Holmes was the top candidate coming out of the interview panel. I conducted an informal interview with Susie, and she is the top candidate. For your information, Susie presently serves as the Finance Director and City Treasurer for the City of Willits. Her biography is in the packet, so I won't go into her background, but Susie is a native of Ukiah, has an associate's degree in accounting, has been in the private sector as a controller for a large petroleum interest, and so she has all the characteristics and background that will make her a success in the job. The at-will employment agreement is for an annual salary of $111,800. The complete at-will agreement is attached for your review. There is one small modification that has been made since the packet was published and that Susie has agreed to, and I'll ask David, maybe you can distribute this to the council. One provision is changed on page 2 of the at-will agreement that it's a very small change, but it just says we changed the term work day to work week, and you can see on the strikeout underline here that the new language says a normal work week will be a total of at least 40 hours. The city manager, at his or her sole discretion, may set and modify the normal weekly schedule without an amendment to this agreement. And the reason for that is that the council does have an objective of eventually, when fiscal conditions are such that the city would return to Monday through Friday operations. So this clause was just changed so that was very clear within the agreement. Other than that, the proposed at-will agreement is very similar with the other Cloverdale senior managers, and just for to the council and the public, the Cloverdale senior management team is the police chief, the city engineer, public works director, the assistant city manager, community development director, and the city manager, and of course, the finance manager. So you have 5 senior managers that have at-will agreements. Another change is that the current salary schedule for the finance manager has a 5-step range. Your staff's recommendation is we eliminate the ranges. It's kind of a holdover. Most at-will service agreements now go to a single salary rather than a traditional 5-step range. So we're going to make that recommending that change. In addition, the title of finance manager, it will be considered for a possible change after the completion of 1 year of service with a standard or better performance evaluation, and the city manager will make a recommendation to the city council for a title change to Finance Director. Doesn't include, it's no change in compensation, but the change of the salary, and it is not a guarantee. With that, also want to say that the at-will agreement also does not include a cost of living adjustment in 2018, which is, I think this council just went through their budget process. So that the COLA adjustment for your other city senior staff is not included in this agreement. And Susie's scheduled to begin work on Monday, September 25th, the Monday after Joanne's last day. We're hoping to be able to have some time for some handoff time. So we'll, I know that there will be amenable for both people to get together in advance before the handoff. We had hopes for a overlap, but after Jose and I consulted, the changes in public employee retirement rules and annuitants just make it an extremely difficult and difficult process to have that overlap of employees. And it was not impossible, but it would have called for a lot of legal maneuvering that we just thought that the price on it would be probably better that we just have a clean break.
And if I may, Mayor, it wasn't about retired annuitants on this one. It was actually the PERS regulations regarding having a salary schedule.
Okay,
And,
that's right.
and the new agreement is actually in this, good opportunity to point to the resolution. Section 2 is actually accomplishing that change in the salary schedule. Currently, as Paul mentioned, there's a 5-tier salary schedule which is left over from when the position was not considered a department head. The council changed that prior to Joanne's hiring. The resolution will amend and supersede the compensation salary schedule for the position of finance manager effective September 22nd, so the day after Joanne retires, therefore not having any PERS retirement implications, to only reflect the compensation of $111,800, which is the compensation under this agreement. That would be the only number under the salary schedule.
And further on the issue of salary, even though it is an increase from the incumbent, one of the things that we take into consideration now after what we call the Public Employees Pension Reform Act is whether an employee is what we call a legacy employee or what we call a PEPRA employee, which is the acronym. In this case, Susie Holmes is what we consider a PEPRA employee. So even though the salary is increasing, the pension obligation is actually less. So the net impact really is an increase of $4,311 because we will be contributing less retirement obligation to a PEPRA employee rather than a legacy employee. So with that, I know that Susie's here, and if this council has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and that I would hope that after your deliberation on this matter and consideration, that either before or after you would allow Susie to make a few comments to the City Council. I know she's very excited about this new opportunity to come to work at the City of Cloverdale.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jose. Council members, are there any questions right now of Susie? Susie, if you'd like to come up and say a few words, and on behalf of the City Council, I'd like to welcome you to the city. And I did have the privilege of sitting in on the interviews, and I was impressed with your abilities, and hope everything will work out just fine. So, but please share with us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm excited for the opportunity, and I've had the privilege of following Joanne to Willits, and now hopefully to Cloverdale, and I look forward to the opportunity. So I thank you.
Thank you, Susie.
Welcome.
Any public comments? Seeing none? Okay. Joe?
Mr. Mayor, I just have a quick comment. I've had the pleasure of working on the Remuth Board of Directors for the last 11 years, and Susie has been on that board for several years, and so we've worked together at that capacity. So not only is she familiar with finances, she's also familiar with the risk management side of it, which we have a lot at stake with that. So she's going to be a welcome addition in that regard as well.
Thank you. Okay, well, there's a resolution if somebody would like to make it.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce the resolution by title only as amended with the new change here that was handed out. City of Cloverdale City Council Resolution number 050 or 06, I can't. I've already lied.
It's 050.
2017. Resolution of City Council, City of Cloverdale, approving an at-will employment agreement with Susie Holmes as Cloverdale Finance Manager and amending the compensation salary schedule for the position of Finance Manager.
Second.
Can we have a roll call, Linda, please?
Councilmember Bagby.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paula.
Aye.
Councilmember Brigham.
Aye.
Councilmember Russell.
Aye.
Mayor Walter.
Aye. Welcome, Susie.
Welcome.
Okay, the next item is, let me see, where are we? We're number 6, resolution number 0512017, authorizing the city manager to execute a service agreement between the City of Cloverdale and the Cloverdale Chamber of Commerce for economic development and promotional services in fiscal year 2017-2018. Paul, this is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Again, another exciting agenda item. This is a project we've been working on for a long time. It's a goal of the Cloverdale City Council to improve Cloverdale marketing and outreach program. And in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce, the goal was to establish a distinct Cloverdale brand to attract local jobs and boost our economic well-being through increased tourism and regional visitors and reducing retail leakage and encouraging greater community unity and pride. I see representatives of the Chamber out in the audience, Ron, Janess, welcome. Janess, Janess is back? Janess? Yeah, good. And Nina Hanchett, the president of the Cloverdale Chamber of Commerce. They've all been working really hard on the new marketing slogan, Experience Cloverdale. I think anybody that follows social media has seen the guerrilla marketing program is really starting to roll out. And they've also been promoting it not only in social media, but with banners and flags, with Friday night tabling effort, the new promotional T-shirts, which are very cool and nice. And each one has not each one, but there's a number of individual slogans on each T-shirt. And so the purpose of tonight's agenda item is to formally approve the new service agreement. This has been discussed previously by the City Council. The services are broken up into essentially, 3 different categories. The existing services, which is the operation of the visitor center, events such as the car show, and other services. Additional services for an additional fee, which will be expanded visitor center hours, a business resource guide, a quarterly newsletter, a city council report 3 times a year, a new business workshop, a Cloverdale destination map, and a new website that can be used by handheld devices. On top of that, then there's an additional contribution of $18,000. Sorry, I might have my numbers here wrong. The supplemental additional funding is a total of $32,000. and that supplements our typical funding of $18,000. So we're going from $18,000 a year for the Chamber of Commerce up to $50,000 a year annually. And I already think that you can really see this program starting to pay off, especially in the community pride. Friday Night Live, you really do see the Experience Cloverdale t-shirts in the crowd. And I know that just from seeing the foot traffic into the Chamber of Commerce, it's made a big difference. So what you have is we negotiated an agreement under the supervision of the City Attorney's Office with the Chamber of Commerce. The agreement sets forth the basic understanding of payment of the $50,000 as well as the scope of work broken into each different three components. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I encourage you to approve the resolution that's attached, which will authorize the execution of the agreement with the Chamber. And I see the representatives of the Chamber here tonight, and so I would hope you would recognize them. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Council members, are there any questions right now?
No, I'd just like to make a comment, if I might, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, Carol.
I wanted to thank the people who are here particularly, and the others on the board. As the city council's liaison, I have had the privilege of watching these folks use their professional knowledge as volunteers. And I think that's very important to understand, that whatever they created out of their own desire to help this city. And frankly, we could not afford to buy professional expertise to have us do that. And I'm very, very grateful for it. And I think it can be quite successful if we all pitch in. I certainly am wearing my T-shirt, and will continue to. I'm not going to wear it to Smart because they get jealous of me from Cloverdale if I do that. I got to play it cool.
Thank you, Carol. Any council members, anything else before I invite them to come up and say a few words? Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one comment under Exhibit A, where it talks about report to the city council 3 times per year. I'd like to see us put some months in there, which months, because it's kind of open-ended. We wouldn't want to report 3 months in a row and then not have one for 9 months. But every 4 months, and maybe identify the months. And I'm not going to dictate what those months should be, but I'd like that so we would know when to expect the report. So if we could add that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, well, my suggestion, we're about 3 months into the program. Well, we're going into the second month of the program right now. So it would be September, and then usually October, November, December. We get into the holidays. How about January?
Yeah, January, because you want the holiday in there.
And then February, March, April. I would say April, because then we're getting ready into the budget process.
Yeah.
And then we're really making a lot of decisions about budget allocations about that time. So is that acceptable with?
Mr. Chairman, my only question is January. When do you get the sales tax figures for Q4?
Yeah, you're talking about the holiday season tax figures? Joanne, those usually roll in about...
Probably right around April, because they have...
It's usually about 3-month lag.
Reports are due, the people that are collecting the sales tax have to remit their sales tax reports to the state by the end of January, and then it takes a couple of months for the state to compile all of that information to give us a report of what the sales are in Cloverdale. So I'm thinking that March or April is probably about the right time for that Christmas season sales tax reports to be published.
So it's a good point, because we all know that in the fiscal year we call that our second quarter, but in the calendar year it's our fourth quarter. It's a critical number that we use to judge our success.
Thank you, Paul. Ron, Nina, would you like to come up and say a few words, or anyone?
But I'm Nina Hanchett, Honorable Mayor and City Council and City staff, and YouTube viewers. Janice Brewer, Ron Pavelka, both fellow board members. just wanted to take a couple of minutes and talk about how we arrived here. The Experience Cloverdale Marketing and Promotion campaign was launched on June 2nd, and it was done before, we talked about it as a chamber, but it was really spearheaded by Janesse Brewer with lots of input from the community, from businesses, from service organizations, from you, and thank you, Janesse, for that. We launched, yeah, and it continues. We launched on the first Friday Night Live, June 2nd. We have the lovely teal promotional t-shirts, and we still have those. We ordered more because of popular demand. So if you want a t-shirt, we have several with different Experience Cloverdale wear. The modifier, we have a number of new ones. Well, actually not new ones, but new from the first batch. And then we have flags that are lining the boulevard at special events and Friday Night Live. We have banners on the freeway. We have a banner on the freeway. We have a banner downtown. And Facebook and Instagram launched simultaneously. And media coverage sort of went along with that in the Reveille and the Press Democrat. We have a branding book underway, which will allow service organizations and businesses to make use of the parameters of the branding, the color scheme, the fonts, if you will, so that it can be used in individual promotional material for your special event, for your business, for your organization. It's a way for businesses to be able to attract people to Cloverdale and into their businesses, whether they be visitors or locals. We are currently working on the 24th Annual Car and Motorcycle Show. It features a cruise on Friday night, September 8th, along with music in the plaza, and then the next day is from 10 to 4 is a motorcycle and car show. We have about 150 cars or vehicles registered so far, and we expect there'll be about 250. Just pray for not triple-digit temperatures. So the streets will be closed down on the boulevard and on First Street, and that's a work in progress. We are actually currently developing that Cloverdale destination map. We are looking for businesses and organizations to buy advertising spots in order to pay for it. So that's underway. And we are looking to target our website, as Paul mentioned, to update our website so that handheld devices can easily access it, and that should be happening in the next couple of months. And you probably already have seen that the chamber is open on the weekends from 10 to 2. There was one issue with a staffing deal that it didn't get open, but we are trying to make that happen too, and keeping a log so that we can determine if we need to do more or less, or, finely tune it. Any questions?
I'm hoping it's already starting to pay off. Did I see right on the social media today is that the Trading Post is the hottest restaurant in Sonoma County?
Yeah.
It was #1.
We're getting a lot of good publicity, a lot of good publicity. What was the piece that you sent, Ron?
Oh, like
Sonoma Magazine.
It was walking like downtown and
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's already paying off.
yeah, it's already paying off, and you can feel it. You can feel it.
You can.
I think that the thing that's a surprise to me, and I must say I feel this way myself, when I see someone, not necessarily on Friday night, wearing their Experience Cloverdale t-shirt, I think, oh, you're part of the team, you're part of the group. And, it's a feeling of pride that, we're on the inside track of what's going on in Cloverdale. So I think it's been sort of a wonderful, uplifting thing for local people too.
And even the couple of naysayers, once you talk to them about what it is, it's like, oh, I get it. So hopefully, as we wear these t-shirts, people will feel comfortable to come up and say whatever they want to say, and we can give them the opportunity to be part of the.
But when you see them in Healdsburg,
Yeah.
you think, wow, it's working.
Good. Well, I know I usually patronize Plank on Saturday and Sunday morning, and I have to tell you, there's more faces that I don't recognize. I mean, I don't know everyone in town, but you know how it is when you think, oh, I've seen him before, or I know her, I've seen her before. I see more strangers in our town now than ever before.
Yeah, that's a
And
good thing.
it's really a good feeling. So thank you for your hard work.
Cloverdale shirt?
You know, Ron, I haven't gotten mine yet, so, yeah.
We are just producing one for the car show, so.
Oh, well, I don't think Joe has one yet either, so. Thank you, but I want to open it up to council members and to the public. Council members, anything to add?
No, I made mine.
Okay. Anybody from the public, would you like to add anything? LaRiva? And before you leave, if you would just sign the green pad with your names. I know we know you, but Linda likes it when we do that.
Well, it also helps, Alan, who's doing the videography too, because if you reviewed the video, all the speakers, all the staff have their proper caption in front of them, and it's very professional.
And David, I'm sure Raphael's trifold brochure will have the information of Experience Cloverdale on it.
We can certainly add that.
Be great.
LaRiva? Push him out of the way.
Friendly Cloverdale.
It's getting late.
LaRiva Miles, I'm a resident of Cloverdale. I just want to let you know, I've been spending a lot of time out of Cloverdale lately, but the amount of people who actually know where Cloverdale is has really changed. I'm spending a lot of time in Santa Rosa, at Santa Rosa Junior College. We used to be known as one of the last affordable places to live in Sonoma County because our prices didn't go up until, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago with property and that sort of thing. But now people know about it because of the restaurants and the great job that you guys are all doing with the Chamber of Commerce. I have a few suggestions just based on things that I've noticed over time in my travels. First of all, if there was any way we could get a light during the night on the sign that we have south of Cloverdale, maybe with solar or something like that, because half of the time the light is not working in terms of advertising how great a place we are. So that would be my first suggestion. Second of all, I took one flight out of the Charles Schultz Airport, didn't really see that much about Cloverdale and everything that I saw on the wall, so I don't know if we can bump up, you know, our marketing so that when people come into the airport, they could know a little bit more about us. And I just learned that you can take Alaska Airlines out of that airport and then go up to Seattle and then get to the East Coast that way. So there are going to be more people coming in from the East Coast that way that I wasn't even aware of. So the airport is also a place for, I think, more advertising to let people know that we exist. Also, when I worked on the Fiddle Festival 6 years ago now, we did cooperative advertising with our sponsor, who was Lagunitas at that time, where they paid for ads and helped us pay for ads that talked about the Fiddle Festival. In the center, it's called like a donut advertising, and I'm sure that with a lot of the advertisers that we have supporting Friday Night Live and all the different events that we have, that we could get some good co-op advertising on radio, because I listen to advertising on radio, especially in Sonoma County, and that goes a long way toward making Cloverdale a part of, you know, whatever else is going on in Sonoma. And then the last thing is that I know that we're going to have a bus bridge from the SMART train, and I'm just wondering if there are any signs that we can put up on the SMART train buses that come all the way up here, just to let people know that, you know, the SMART train's going to eventually come up here, but we can kind of like start that idea going in their mind that, you know, it's just a little bit further up to Cloverdale. So those are just some ideas that I have to make us stand out even more in a more county sort of way than just local.
Thank you, LaRiva. Anyone else from the public? See no one, I'll bring it back to the dais one more time.
I just
Carol?
wanted to respond to LaRiva, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, there should be opportunities to probably to put good ads on the buses as they come up, because our bus is essentially getting us to the airport so that we can get on the train. as opposed to, stopping in multiple places. But what's good is you'll get commuter traffic and visitor traffic. And the important thing for us, now that you bring it up, is to advertise at the stations. That's the big thing, because that's where we're going to catch people, particularly certain key stations, I think. And as soon as I find out when we're permitted to open, when all the federal requirements are taken care of, we'll be able to get back with some real things. But in the meantime, by all means, check out anybody who's interested in finding out more. We have a new website at Smart that's easier, I think, to navigate and get your answers on than the old one was. And I'll give you a lot of information about advertising. But good ideas, excellent ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Excuse me.
Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank both the Chamber and the Lariva. Excellent comments. I would like to see us explore further the lighting of the monument sign. I really know we looked at that when that sign went in, and it was cost prohibitive, but I know with solar technology, and there may be ways that we should maybe at least revisit it and see if that's something that we can take a look at as we move forward, because it is, especially in the winter, I mean, it's dark by 4:30, 5 o'clock, and it's pretty dark, so there may be something we can do. So I'd like to see that on the list, to get some prices and figure out if there's options for that.
Thank you, Joe.
Maybe assign it to a subcommittee, community public works or community development or something, just to follow up on that.
Thank you. Okay, there's a resolution on the table.
I'll read the resolution by title only, Mr. Mayor. City of Cloverdale City Council Resolution Number 051-2017. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Cloverdale authorizing the city manager to execute a service agreement between the Cloverdale Chamber of Commerce and the City of Cloverdale for economic development and promotional services in fiscal year 2017-2018.
I'll second it, Mr. Mayor.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Bagby?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paula?
Aye.
Councilmember Brigham?
Aye.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Walter?
Aye. And Councilmember Paula suggested that we look into some type of a light for the monument sign, so can we assign that to a subcommittee?
Or I think that the appropriate place would be probably your Public Works Subcommittee.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And we're talking about the freeway sign.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Item number 7, review a draft of the Americans with Disability ADA compliance policy. And this is Linda?
Yes. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. I'll be presenting this. This item is a first touch review of a proposed American with Disability Act, ADA policy and procedure. Chris Carmona, the new liability claims administrator with REMA, recently sent out an email to cities suggesting that agencies who do not have an ADA policy or procedure in place develop one. He commented that Caltrans and DOJ perform periodic audits to see if agencies have an ADA policy and procedure available to the public. Mr. Carmona supplied a sample policy and procedure from another city, which was used in the development of this policy and procedure. Legal counsel has reviewed and approved the draft policy procedure with a couple of minor edits. This policy is mandatory and is important to ensure that the City of Cloverdale provides accessibility both architecturally and programmatically to people with disabilities, as set forth in the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. The policy procedure provides clear direction on implementation and procedure for filing a grievance should a person believe that he or she has been subject to discrimination by the city on the basis of a disability. This is a first touch discussion item in order that the council may consider formal adoption of the Americans with Disability Act compliance policy and procedure at a subsequent meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Linda. Council members?
Yeah, looks great.
Mr. Mayor.
Good to me.
It looks great.
It looks
Joe?
good to me, too. I know sitting on the REMA board, I know these are very important policies, and I'm thankful that they did reach out, and I'm thankful that they gave us a draft, and I think it conforms with current law, and I think we have a responsibility to move it forward. So
I agree.
I'm good
Yeah,
with
it's
it.
good.
Okay, thank you. Anyone from the public wishing to talk to us about this? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the dais. If there's no further questions, there's a resolution.
I believe
Paul,
it's an information item.
No, it's an information item, and based on what I'm hearing from the council, it appears that there's a good consensus on this item. It would come back probably on August 22nd as a consent calendar item.
Well, I just saw the resolution on the back here, but...
That will be the resolution that we'll
For the
put
consent
forward
item.
for a formal adoption next.
Very good, thank you.
Next meeting.
Okay.
Fixed assets.
Next item is, let's see, resolution number 053-2017, adopting a fixed assets capitalization policy for the city of Cloverdale. Joanne?
Thank you, Mayor Walter, council members. The policy that you have in your packet this evening was developed to provide up-to-date reference source for the finance department staff when fixed assets are purchased by the city. The city of Cloverdale has a significant investment in the tools and in the equipment that they need to deliver the services that they provide to the community. Excuse me. The policy defines a fixed asset as a tangible item costing $10,000 or more with a useful life of more than 1 year. Anything with a useful life of less than 1 year would simply be written off as a maintenance item in the current budget. Also included in fixed assets are additions or improvements to existing fixed assets that would extend their useful life. The second page of the policy describes the type of assets that are capitalized and depreciated over time based on those useful lives. We did discuss the various fixed assets with the department heads and the Public Works Department, both in water, sewer, and streets. So Mark and Darren and Jay all chimed in as to what assets they need. The policy it's one of those things like even the ADA. It comes to you from other cities. So it's a tested policy, but everybody's equipment is a little bit different. So it's always good to have your people review it and make sure that their items are covered. Depreciation is calculated in Cloverdale on a straight line basis. So we take the value of the fixed asset, we write it off over its useful life. Once an asset is either sold or has reached the end of its useful life, then we remove it from the books. And this is a schedule that we review every year as a part of the closing process and prepare for the audit. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on the schedule or the policy.
Thank you, Joanne. Council members?
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Joe?
Just real quickly, like I look under the emergency generators and the useful life is 15 years. That seems a little short to me. I'm just, how did we arrive at a 15-year lifespan for?
Well, those time periods were reviewed by the Public Works Department, various department heads.
Because I know we have an emergency backup generator for all the wells as well as for the police operations. They're all under a 15-year. Does that mean that we'd phase them out after 15 years to replace them, or does that mean it's basically continues to work, operate until it?
It just means we'll divide the cost by 15 and write off 1/15 of it every year. And it certainly could continue to operate after that time.
Okay.
But say if you have a very large piece of equipment and it requires a new battery and the battery extends the life, then you can write that battery off over time too. It helps your fund balance to write things off over a period of time rather than very large amounts being spent and just coming off your bottom line.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And Joanne, on some of those depreciation years mandated by the IRS.
I'm not really
In other words,
sure.
they only give you a certain life expectancy on certain items.
I assume so.
I think, anyhow.
I'm sure on autos and light trucks and things like that, probably. I don't know if they do the specialized things.
Right.
They do generally for stuff, and I know when we had, and our business, we didn't have a lot of that, but we had a couple of things, and, it was dictated. Otherwise, we'd all be choosing our own,
Joanne, did you want to add something?
I'm just not that familiar with the IRS rules, to be honest with you.
Neither am I. I didn't mean to imply I was, but any other questions by council? I'd like to open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to say something about this item? Seeing no one, we'll bring it back, and this time we do have a resolution.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like
For
to
the
go.
resolution.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. By title only, City of Cloverdale, City Council Resolution Number 053, 2017, a resolution of the City of Cloverdale City Council adopting a fixed assets capitalization policy.
Second.
Could we have a roll call, Linda?
Councilmember Bagby?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paula?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Walter?
Aye. Okay, next item is subcommittee reports. Airport, Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next scheduled meeting is October 3rd at 8 a.m. in City Hall.
Okay, thank you. Next item is the Finance, Administration, and Police. We did have a meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for August the 24th at 2 p.m. At the last meeting, we discussed this item that we just passed a resolution on, and we also, I believe, had an update on the Times Square property and the police station. And I refer you to the minutes of the meeting. Next is the Planning and Community Development. Marianne?
Next scheduled meeting is August 23rd at 4 p.m.
Thank you. How about the Public Works, Melanie?
Next scheduled meeting is September 26th.
Thank you. Joint City Fire District, Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do not have a meeting scheduled. We're in the process of confirming a date. So it should be in October. We just don't have a date nailed down yet because of different conflicts. So hopefully at our next meeting, we'll have that nailed down and all. So we don't have a date.
Thank you. The School District City Subcommittee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next meeting is scheduled for September 11th, 5 p.m. It's over in City Hall Conference Room.
Thank you. You know, I have to tell you, the last couple of mornings I've been walking my new dog, Gracie, down to the high school and around the block and up. And the last couple of mornings when I went past the high school, they were doing this remodeling. And they were throwing away piles and piles of books. I mean, I brought some home, and I'm going to bring them to the next school subcommittee meeting. I'm only hoping that the school district approached the library or the library system and said, hey, we're getting rid of all of these books. And I'm not talking textbooks. I'm talking paperback books. One was on, well, a couple of them I picked up were on the heritage of Spanish, the heritage of Greece. I mean, they were educational books, but they weren't the traditional books. So if you have a free minute tomorrow, take a swing through the parking lot right in front of the tennis courts. They just have piles of stuff they're throwing away.
Wow.
So
Why would they not,
right.
would there be not a program? That's not like them, because they're usually very
I know.
concerned about that
I
kind
would
of thing.
hope that they talk to somebody, but just to see those books in a big pile was really something to see.
Thank you.
So, council reports. Why don't we start with Melanie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I submitted my my report in writing, but I wanted to bring to everyone's attention that today Sonoma Clean Power is opening up their Drive Evergreen program with significant incentives for purchasing, leasing both new and used electric vehicles. I included the URL, I believe, in my report. It's at sonomacleanpower.com. I'd encourage everybody to go there, and the numbers are pretty unbelievable, including people, especially people like us who are lucky enough to live in the Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District, where In addition to all of the rebates that Sonoma Clean Power is offering, and in addition to the federal and state incentives, we get an additional $3,000 for living in this air district to invest in an electric vehicle, and it makes it very affordable for everybody to get into an electric vehicle. And then there are additional incentives for lower income folks. So I would encourage you to spread the word. When you go to the website and you look at the numbers, the big question is, are you eligible for all of these? And the answer is,
Yes.
you add up the numbers, and most people are eligible for most of them. So I encourage you to get the word out, apply yourselves, encourage the city staff, and it's in the report. Yeah, I encourage everybody to apply and see what's available. In addition to the electric vehicle incentives, there are incentives for you essentially get a free. You can get up to 2 free charging stations at your home, and there are also extra incentives if you elect to go with the Evergreen, which is the 100% renewable. So I encourage you to get the word out to your constituents and your networks. And it opens today, and it's going to end. It's in October. So, but it's just a wonderful opportunity to get and in addition to the advantages of having the electric vehicle rebates, maintenance is significantly less expensive, and of course gas is considerably less expensive, so it's really great for low-income folks to get in and have an opportunity to get an affordable car that's also affordable for them, for everyone to maintain. So that's it. Thank you.
And Melanie, that's strictly for electric hybrids on?
It's electrics.
Only?
Electrics. It can be hybrid electric, so
Yes.
it can be.
Oh.
It's
Can be
various
both.
models. It's Ford, Chevrolet, BMW. There's a Mercedes on the list, and a Nissan and a Volkswagen. All of them,
All of good
various
stuff.
models. Some of which are pure electric, some of which are hybrid electric,
Yeah.
for longer range. And of course, the newer electrics. I think all of them have over 120 mile range, which for most commutes that satisfies folks even living in Cloverdale and commuting down to Santa Rosa. So it's just a really great opportunity to get in there and do something for your pocketbook and do something for the planet.
Thank you.
That's it.
And I think I saw this in the Gazette as
It's
well.
everywhere. But if you could get it out to your social network, it always helps.
Thank you. Joe?
My report's in the packet, so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, it's
Right there. Thank you. Mary Ann?
No.
Carol?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Councilmember Bagby for bringing up the discount. We're very excited about it at Sonoma County Transit Regional Climate Protection Authority, too, and got a very nice report from Mark Landsman on it. They're very excited. It's a second go-around, and I think it's greatly expanded. My report is in your packet. I want to thank Linda for helping me. I had to do it a little late because I had information was very important for you. If the only thing you read are the key points attached to my normal report, which is related to a ruling on August 2nd in a lawsuit brought by the Riverwatch that was decided, unfortunately, against Regional Climate Protection Authority, in that and I'm simplifying things terribly, but basically the decision by the judge of Superior Court was that we did not meet CEQA requirements. I've got some talking points in here. This is an extremely important issue, and we have not yet had the board meeting that will cover all of this, but I anticipate that September 11th, I believe, is our next board meeting. And it's a very, very, very significant issue. And I'm very, very concerned about the outcome of that suit, because it can affect some wonderful things that we're doing with all of the cities here. And everybody has signed on. We've got all kinds of wonderful things going on. I'd hate to see it all stopped. At any rate, there we are. And that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, council members, wrapping it up here, legislative reports. Anything? How about city manager, city attorney reports?
The only thing I have to report to the council is that I'll be going on a summer vacation starting on Friday, and next week David Kelly will be in charge at City Hall.
Okay. It's in good hands, Paul. You can have a good vacation.
Thank you.
Council direction for further agenda items? Well, just one thing, Thursday, day after tomorrow, we have our mayors and council members down in Roanoke Park. Is everyone going, or? I'm going.
I'm going.
Carol, are you going?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think there's a number of key staff members attending. I think Chief Parker's scheduled to attend. I think the city engineer's scheduled to attend, and the assistant city manager. I'm signed up to attend, but I'm also starting vacation, so with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I might keep my options open.
Absolutely. David, and we did get the City of Cloverdale report into them on time. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. I noticed that there was no executive committee meeting prior to the general meeting. Did I get that right?
I will double check that for you, but I have not seen an agenda for an executive committee meeting prior to the meeting, or prior to the lunch, or the reception and the meal.
Okay.
So I'll double check that for you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Council members, thank you. We've been at it since 3 o'clock this afternoon. You've done a very good job staying awake. Staff, as always, I thank you for your hard work. Linda, I'm available to sign something if you have it for me. With that being said, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.